Do you think if there was a Brexit vote today, it would go a different direction?
Listen, I don't know, but I don't know is the answer. But I suspect a lot of people will have looked themselves in the mirror since 2016 and thought themselves.
The Brexit reset has reset Brexit in Britain. And the reason this has happened is because the Brexiteers have gone absolutely crazy, screaming betrayal. And they are only screaming to themselves and to their media chums and supporters. But the truth is, the majority of the country has moved on. The majority of the country knows that Brexit is a disaster, and they want a pragmatic solution to the Brexit aberration. And the reset looks practical and a good solution to get us further ahead and out of this mess. But it actually occurred to me that in many ways this is what is going on in America. They have got Trumpism like Brexitism. The difference is with us and Brexitism is that it goes across all of the parties because of the fact that there was a separate referendum for this decision, whereas it clearly is only Trump voters that voted for Trump. Whereas here we had Labour, some Lib Dem, Tory voters, UKIP voters wanting Brexit, and it's made an absolute mess. And it means that the Remainers never had a clear vehicle to push back against Brexit reality. And even to this day, that is the case because no political party is actually out there calling for the end and death of Brexit by rejoining the European Union, apart from the Rejoin Party, which is obviously struggling to get any headway because the media won't give any attention to anyone who wants to talk about rejoining the European Union. But I think there was a turning point this week because it's clear that the Labour MPs who understand the country have moved on and they're looking at the polls, and I think that we are going to start to see some step changes. But even from my perspective, I think we have been very, very tolerant in accepting that the vote won and that we had to live with Brexit and put up with it and let them believe that they were the winners. But I think the tide is changing, it's turning, and we've had enough of actually pretending to believe or allow them to have their fantasy when it's causing so much damage and really, really inflicting pain on people. And enough is enough. I think the problem is that a lot of people don't like the thought of revisiting the Brexit wars and another vote. But if you think about it in terms of Trumpism, and actually if there was one clear decision for people who understand that everything is connected to Brexit and the need to undo it, then perhaps there might be some progress. This week, there has been more exposure about Keir Starmer's inner circle and Morgan McSweeney in particular. There is already a beginning of a revolt against the disabled cuts, and obviously Keir Starmer has moved on the winter fuel, and I'm pretty sure at some stage there could be some changes perhaps to the Chancellor, and we'll see what comes from that. But it does feel as though this week is a pivotal moment. It's a moment where I think we have faced a backlash of Brexit betrayal screams, which have only ended in Brexiteers, in Brexit parties, actually damaging themselves.
I suspect a lot of people will have looked themselves in the mirror since 2016 and thought themselves, hello, what did I do? It has to be a win. I mean, as Bruno was saying just now, listen, nothing is straightforward, but the most important thing is you have to understand is it's 10 years or 9 years since we voted to come out of Europe. It's 5 years since we did the deal in 2020. But in reality, look what has happened in the world since then. There's been massive global change. And the UK is finding itself increasingly stranded now, and we've got to find a role for ourselves. And then we've been ignoring the 250 million people across the Channel, 20 miles away, who are the power base in this part of the world, and we should be attached to them. We shouldn't be talking about surrender, and we shouldn't be talking about what we're giving up. We should be talking about an opportunity.
The argument here, Stuart, is if we align with the EU on food standards, we sacrifice sovereignty. That's the argument. What do you say?
I don't quite understand the word sovereignty, because we are all interconnected in this world, and anything that you do where you take something from somebody else, you could construe as being giving up sovereignty. It's nonsense. The reality is that we all need each other, and we've seen that so markedly with what's happened in the last year or so with the war in the Ukraine, with what's happening now, the terrible things in Gaza, with what's happening now. We've got Trumpism in the States. We can no longer rely on our old partners. We are a small country with the 5th largest economy in the world, which is large, but we're going to the 6th. We've lost trade in the last 10 years. We need to re-establish those ties. And why would you not re-establish it with people with whom you have an affinity?
I guess the question is, because some things, people who voted for Brexit would say to you, Stuart, so some things are more important than economics. They're about national pride and national sense of self, not being an island of strangers, in the phrase of...
That is true. That is true, Stig. Sorry to interrupt you, but that is true. But in reality, 5 years is a long time. 9 years is a long time. And people's attitudes change. I've always regarded the British public as having the most common sense of any nation state in the world. We are practical, pragmatic people. And I saw some reports, and this is only me quoting what I read, I may be wrong, saying that there's a lot of now evidence on polls that people are much more pragmatic themselves about what they voted for 5 or 7 years ago, and they've changed their attitudes. We all change. Listen, we change our government every 5 years potentially, so why can't we change our minds about Brexit over 10 years?
This is not a surrender then, in your view? I mean, Kemi
No, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. I really am quite disappointed and sad that I live in a country. I am a conservative, although I am not a politically active conservative. I'm not a politician. But to hear that the Conservatives are saying this is potentially, we must be rule givers and not rule takers. It's about giving a bit, taking a bit, and understanding this is a very difficult, unpleasant world we live in, and we've got to make sure that for the UK public and for the UK, we do our best. That's what we elect our politicians to do. That's what I expect them to do. And talking about small things like surrender is pathetic.
Do you think if there was a Brexit vote today, it would go a different direction?
Listen, I don't know, but I don't know is the answer. But I suspect a lot of people will have looked themselves in the mirror since 2016 and thought to themselves, hello, what did I do?
Last year, Nigel Farage's party Reform UK cost the Tories dozens, maybe 100 plus seats at the election. Now it looks like Nigel Farage's party is hitting Labour too. But has Keir Starmer adopted the right strategy to deal with it? Right, this is the big picture. Last year's general election led to a Labour landslide. And now this is the situation from May the 1st this year, the council elections which put Reform in first place. Success at the expense of Labour too. So what would happen if we assumed that that result was evenly replicated across the parliamentary constituencies where there were elections? This is where those county council elections took place in England, shaded in grey. And within these areas are 77 complete Labour-held Westminster seats. Or here they are in a list. It includes places like Wickham, where Treasury Minister Emma Reynolds holds, or Lincoln, where there is the Foreign Office Minister Hamish Faulkner. Now, if for fun we map the county council results for May the 1st evenly across these general election constituencies, almost all those Labour seats are gone, all lost, apart from 5 of them. Mostly, it has to be said, to Reform UK. And what if we took that swing and applied it evenly across the whole country? Well, we could even see Angela Rayner losing her seat in Greater Manchester, Liz Kendall, Jess Phillips in Birmingham, gone. Now, yes, local and national elections are different, but it's worth noting that the YouGov national opinion polls paint a pretty similar picture to the local elections. Meanwhile, in 89 out of the 98 constituencies where Reform UK came second, Labour were in first, so Labour MPs are feeling the heat from Farage. And this man knows it. He knows the Reform UK threat is real. And he's chasing their voters. And you can tell this in recent announcements. slashing aid spending, abandoning green promises, hard talk about immigration, and living on an island of strangers. So all of that seems sensible given the reform threat? Actually not. Let's look at some interesting data. Right, this block here, this is all of the people that voted Labour in last year's general election. Now, thanks to YouGov polling, we know what people in this block now would do with their vote. And it shows Labour has lost more than half of last year's voters. Just 46% say they still vote for Keir Starmer's party. But despite this PM's strategy, they're not actually going to reform UK in large numbers. Look at this, just 6% of Labour voters at last year's general election, 6 out of every 100 say they would vote reform now. That's all. So where have the voters gone? Well, they've lost much more of the vote to liberal and left-wing parties. 12% to the Liberal Democrats, 9% to the Greens. Just pause there. That means the number of Labour voters who've switched to the Lib Dems and Greens, arguably on the left of the political spectrum, is 3 times the number going to reform on the right. Just 2% go to the Tories, but much more seriously, 22% aren't going to vote or don't know or won't say what they'll do with the vote. Disgruntled ex-Labour voters who aren't happy with what the government is doing. The bottom line is that people who vote reform really typically have never backed Labour in large numbers. Now, this chart here, it shows how reform voters last year voted in every election since 2005. And you can see reform voters are former UKIP voters, or they're Boris Johnson's Tories. It's never been ex-Labour voters in anything like large numbers. You can see the red line down here. Or let's put it another way. While 11% of voters may one day be open to voting reform, 70% are at risk of going to Lib Dems or the Greens. 7 times the threat from reform. And typically, these voters don't like the hardline reform-leaning policies and talk of Keir Starmer recently. So here it is again. This box shows Labour's voters from last year's general election, and the colour is where they go now. There is a far bigger threat from the left and amongst those who might stay at home than there is from the right and from reform. So our data suggests that Keir Starmer really is trying to be like Nigel Farage light, but it might not be the answer. Is Labour's strategy really working?